Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias, brought to you by the Cat Production Team.
Originally I was planning on doing a video on these two knives. These are both Rough Ryder camp knives. These are of the first generation of camp knives. I believe these are the 533, the amber jig bone ones. And if you notice, not only are the shields different, but the bone is different enough that they actually look like two distinct different knives. And obviously, guess which one I like better? The older one, the first iteration of the amber jig bone versus the later iteration, which really looks more like a brown jig bone instead of an amber jig bone. But in any case, beyond that, both knives function about the same. This one's a little stiffer because it hasn't been used nearly as much as this one has. I've used this one, broken in, and I've carried it and everything else. This one is brand spanking new, so I haven't even cleaned it out yet, so I expect it to be a little gunked up and everything, so that's not a big deal. But anyway, when this knife showed up and I was going to start talking about it, it's like, man, I am definitely starting to turn into a broken record when it comes to Rough Ryder knives. And it seems like the more I thought about it, the more I started thinking, you know what? I have like turned into the hipster of Rough Ryder knives. And I don't know when that happened. It wasn't because I was drinking PBR or anything like that, but it definitely does seem that I'm that guy on YouTube who is like, I remember when Rough Ryder knives did this, and they were, you know, they were so much better than they are today. And I might be giving people the impression that I have stopped liking Rough Ryder knives, or that I have decided that they're really not worth buying, and that is definitely not the case. I still believe that for knives in their price range, the older Rough Ryder knives as well as the current production Rough Ryder knives are probably the best knife you're going to buy in that price range when it comes to traditional pattern knives. And they're also making good headways in the modern folders, and they have always done a good job on modern folders too. They just weren't that popular. And so I thought what I would do is chat about Rough Ryder knives for a bit, and also defend some of the things that people have said about Rough Ryder knives. The first one I'm going to jump on right away is blade centering. Well, this is a little one, but even with this one, you can see the blade is not centered. Well, guess what? The knife is also under $15. What do you expect for a knife under $15? Perfection? If that is an issue, then the issue isn't so much with the knife, but the issue is something with you. This is one of my favorite of the Rough Ryder knives, and if you notice, this has got copper on it, and guess what? I just polished it before I did this. But I really like the black smooth bone on this one because it is not a solid black. The backside is more solid, but this reminds me of the way copper would tarnish, the green coloring and everything in it, and the way it turns black over time and everything. So the bone kind of reminds me of the way copper will turn. Same with the blade. A lot of people don't like the black blade on this knife. I like it, the black coating. This is just a really cool knife. I really like it. This is one of the current production Rough Ryder knives that I fell in love with. There's other current production Rough Ryder knives that I'm not as crazy about. But when it comes to the little cub lockback, I went ahead and got it in the stag bone, and I also got it in the, I think this is the 25th anniversary one or something like that, with the black titanium, also with black smooth bone and red liners. This one does not have red liners. So they're all a little different. And then I went ahead and grabbed them in the Queen City lineup, which everyone knows is pretty much made in the Rough Ryder factory and are very close to what you find in the Rough Ryder lineup. So this was a pattern that I really enjoyed from Rough Ryder, and I even bought it despite the big R on the bolster. That has probably been my biggest complaint about most of the modern production Rough Ryder knives. Once the Colt factory closed, they moved that big Anaconda C from the Colt knives. They removed that and they started slapping the big R on the Rough Ryder knives, and I just don't find it that appealing. That is one of my gripes about Rough Ryder, but that is an aesthetic thing. There's plenty of other people who actually like the big R, and they have come out and said they like the big R, and it remains popular with Rough Ryder. So that is a personal taste. That has nothing to do with the quality of the build or anything else. And as you can tell here, depending on which one you're getting, they all are slightly off center. But otherwise, the build quality is really nice on these little knives. See it? There's not a lot of gapping or anything else. Lockup is really nice and tight. You've got a lock back on there. You've got the little finger choil. It feels good in the hand, and this is just a really nice little box cutter. You got the swedge up on top there on all of them. And the swedges are something that I do kind of appreciate on the modern Rough Riders. You don't see that on a lot of the older Rough Riders. Some of them had it, but not all of them. And now it's kind of like just the opposite. Most Rough Ryder knives made after the closing of Colt will have that swedge on the blade, and a few don't. In the past, a few Rough Ryder knives, such as the Dogbone Jack, that had the swedge on the blade, but for the most part, most Rough Ryder knives did not have a swedge on the blade. This one also has a half stop on this one, but as you notice, only the main blade had that swedge. But even the older Rough Ryder Barlows, the large Barlows, Granddaddy Barlows, Big Daddy Barlows, those also had a swedge. And so here is the Big Daddy Barlow in saw-cut bone. I picked this one up right when it first came out. What number is this one? It is, and you notice it also has the half stop as well as a swedge going on. And this is RR944. So I think this was made somewhere around 2009, 2010. And really solid, good action knife. Notice it is not perfectly aligned there either, but the build quality is really exceptional for a knife that at the time I think cost about 13 bucks. It was not an expensive knife. When this one first came out, I praised the Rough Ryder stamp into the bolster, and I complained about the Rough Ryder bomb shield. This is one of the shields that I least like on Rough Riders to begin with. I don't really care that much for the bomb shield, and I pointed that out when the knife came out. I think that was on one of the knife sites that I didn't like shields on Big Daddy Barlows, and I've said that all along. And then you have one of the latest ones that have come out, and that is this one is in the Rough Ryder High Plains series. And really good coloration in the bone there. I like the way it is done. And would I have rather been a saw cut bone? Yeah, but they've already done saw cut bone. So they did this High Plains series bone, and it is really nice. And the action on this is also quite well. Actually, this action on the Toothpick is a little lighter. I would say this one is like around a 5 or 6, whereas this one would be closer to a 7 or 8 on the opening, or 6 or 7. It's just a little harder to open. And this one is number, what is it, 2046. We know it came out last year, 2020. Sorry for the fingerprints on there. Both of them have the same steel in it, 440A stainless steel. And matter of fact, if you notice, there you have the RR Rough Rider, the double R. Which one does this have? Yeah, this still has the old horseshoe. A lot of people like the old horseshoe Tang stamp better than the double R. Other people really like the double R. It's a matter of taste. Because they left off a shield on this, I kind of liked it better. I wasn't as crazy about the big R on the bolster like the way it is, but that's where it belonged on a Big Daddy Barlow. The shield or the company name belongs on the bolster, so I wasn't nearly as upset with the big R on the Big Daddy Barlow as I was with the shield on the saw cut bone Big Daddy Barlow. That's just the way it is. That's my preference, you know. Does that say anything about the quality of the build of these knives? Not at all. They're both exceptionally well-made knives. And as you can see in this one, this is an older Rough Rider, yet it also had the half stop and it also had the swedge going on. And I'm one of those people who don't buy into the myth of if it has a half stop, it is a better quality knife. All knives have some form of half stop. Almost always the blade will stop at the top. So Rough Rider is coming out with a new camp knife. Matter of fact, it's based on the Camp King. The Camp King has a half stop. Well, these will naturally stop or slow down at the top. They don't just automatically, when you start closing this knife from here, it's not going to go flinging all the way over and snapping closed. They typically will stop at the middle. It's what I refer to as a lazy half stop. Somewhere around here, they lose action against the back spring. They just, the tension is no longer there. Or actually the tension is built up enough to stop it from moving. And then as you start to close, the tension will increase. And that's the way it works. So let's look at it on a Camp King. So the main difference is on the Camp King, it snaps to that spot. It's a definite stop. On the other one, it just doesn't have a definite stop. And that's the way the heel of the blade is made. That's all that is. I don't see that as a sign of quality or anything. The sign of quality is the overall build of the knife and the material that are used to build the knife.
I opted to edit out 1 minute and 56 seconds of mindless, repetitive rambling. Trust me, it was for your own good.
But at the same time, if I get a Rough Rider knife, for instance, this is the Easy Money Rough Rider Canoe, and if I get a knife like this and I find that it has some issues, I'm not about to, because part of what I do here is stake my reputation on my YouTube channel. If I find an issue with a Rough Rider knife, I'm going to point it out. And for instance, with these with the newer Rough Rider canoes, I find the blade pull a lot lighter than on the older canoes. Now this one, I would say this is in the Stonework series, and you can see you really need to pull it open a little bit. I would say the pull on this is probably around a 5 or 6, and the same with the back blade. There's no real rubbing or anything, but I'm talking about rubbing in the joints, not blade rub. There is sometimes blade rub on a canoe. Matter of fact, there's often blade rub on a canoe and also on Stockman's or any other knife where two blades are dropping into the same channel.
Yeah, I decided to delete another 2 minutes and 32 seconds of basically repetitiveness, and I will be covering blade rub in a little bit anyway. So there you go.
But the real thing I was wanting to talk about with these is this one, yeah, it has the half stops, but I like the pull on this knife better. I like the heavier pull on this knife than the lighter pull on that one. Does that mean that this knife is worse? No, it means it is different. Other people might be looking at this and they might have issues opening this and saying, I don't like the pull on this Canoe. It's just too hard. I don't like the fact that you have to open it there and then pull it all the way out again. And they don't like the way it's closing or something. Whereas other people go, I love the snap on this blade, the way it just drops. So that's a personal preference thing. That is not saying anything negative about the knife. It is saying what I prefer, and it's not judging the quality of the knife. Both of these knives are well-made quality knives. They just have a different pull, and that is something that has happened with some of the newer Rough Riders. They have a lighter pull with a half stop. Older ones have a stronger pull and have more tension built in there than the newer ones do. However, when you're cutting down on something, guess what? That blade is not moving no matter what. It moves when I do that, but if I'm cutting down, it's not moving. And that's the way the knife is supposed to be used. I'm not going to be trying to, what am I trying to do like this? Am I trying to guillotine something? And then I'm complaining because it's too easy to close? I don't know. See, that's the difference. So I know this is going on a little while, and maybe I'm nitpicking, but I just want to make it very clear that my issues are not with the quality of a Rough Rider knife. I still think they are top quality knives. It's other things, and it's all personal preference. Okay, back to blade rub and this semi non-rant about Rough Riders. This one has a distinct line. There is definite blade rub going on there. See it right there, blade rub. Can you see that? See that line? That is blade rub, and it gets worse every time I open the knife. And guess what? That is a common problem in Stockmans. If you collect Stockmans, you know that happens, and it's because you see how those blades are. They are not really touching. They are not touching at all. However, they are tight. They are tight in the handle. And the only way you can prevent that blade rub from happening is widening this thing up, and then it becomes uncomfortable to carry. And what happens is, now if you can see, when I open the blade, I'm pushing into the other blade, and it is dragging across. The spay blade is dragging across the sheep foot. So the very tip of your spay blade here is hitting the backside of the sheep foot blade. And that's how you end up with that line going on with the blade rub. But the only way you could basically prevent that from happening, it doesn't happen when it's closing either. It just drops. It doesn't hit at that point. It is because I am pushing the blade into the other blade. There's only one way to prevent that from happening. You can do this if you want to keep that thing pristine every time you want to open the blade up. But these knives were not designed for a showpiece. They were designed for using, and so blades get scratched, and so it is a common issue, and it is a non-issue for anyone who actually uses a Stockman all the time. And yeah, you end up getting that blade rub sometimes across the back of the blade here too, because guess what? You see the line up there? When you push this blade, see how it moves? It hits the sheep foot blade. Anytime you have more than one blade sharing a channel, you have a chance of blade rub. And if it doesn't develop on the very first day you're using it, it will probably develop over time with usage. These knives are pinned together. They're not modern folders. They're not screwed together and everything else. So you can't go around adjusting the tension or anything else like that. That is a fact of life with traditional pattern knives. A lot of people are coming back to traditional pattern knives. They're running into these issues and they're saying, man, these things are junk. No, they are a different animal than the knife you're used to. So things like blade rub are not a big deal. In any case, especially with a $15 Rough Ryder knife, isn't the saw cut bone beautiful? I love the saw cut bone. They really need to come out with it again. And I am one of those people who love the shell handles. That's what they called these, I think, the shell handle on the saw cut bone. A lot of people did not like that. It was a big gripe about it. So again, personal preference. I liked them. Other people did not. In fact, I really liked it in the toothpicks. I got 2 of them here. I've actually owned about 5 or 6 of these toothpicks. I've given a few of them away. They came out with a round shield, and then the later one came out with what was known as the bow tie shield. I like both of these shields also, and I also like the way the saw cut bone changed over time. I actually prefer the lighter saw cut bone over the darker saw cut bone. But some people prefer the darker, and well, that's the way it goes. But for me, I look at these 2 knives and it's like they're 2 totally different knives, even though they're exact same pattern number. One last part that I want to yap about on Rough Ryder knives, and that is the 3.5-inch Barlows that they have, and people have been giving them a ton of grief, and I think it's unfair. And what they've been complaining about, this is my one in the stag bone, and I guess that isn't as bad as some of the ones that people have had. But if you notice, you have the front blade there, which is really right down there on the line there. And then you have the back blade, and some people have an issue getting to that back blade. And they just say they can't get their little paw in there. I do know one thing, that if you have a shorter nail, it works a lot better. You can get in there a lot better. You can get a better grip on it. I also know that it's not an issue for me, and it's probably because I've been carrying Barlows for so long, and I am so used to how that nail nick is, that I just don't have any problem with that. I mentioned this in my May Almost Live also. I was flipping these out back and forth, no problem, over and over, and I have no issue with it. And it really has not changed much. The difference now is the new Rough Ryder Barlows have a swedge and a half stop, but here's one of the older pattern Rough Ryder Barlows, and if you look there, that back nail nick is really buried, yet I have no problem. I can get to it with no problem. Same here, you know. I don't know what it is. Some people, I guess, they're like this. It's like, well, don't do that. Put your thumb down in there and pull it out. It's not that hard, you know. And it's a similar issue on a lot of Barlows. Here's my Baron Son one. Notice how close those lines are. It's the same thing, but I just get my thumb in there and I pull it up. And here's a very old Camillus one, and it looks like it has about the same issue that the Rough Ryder Barlows have. Notice that? It's hiding. The back nail nick is hiding. But I just reach back there and I stick my thumb in there. You have to actually put your thumb between the 2 blades and pull it up. And unless you have a really, really, really thick thumbnail, I don't know why you can't get your thumbnail in there, because you're not getting your whole thumb in there. You're just getting your thumbnail in there. If you got a really long thumbnail, you might have more issues with it, because it's, you know, you're not just going to get as good of a grip. So keep your thumbnails trimmed, and you shouldn't have a problem opening up old traditional pattern knives. Now, admittedly, if Rough Ryder wanted to solve the issue for good, they could do like what Case has done, and they have put the main blade up front, and they put the older blade in the back. And so, you have, or you put the old nail nick in the back too then. So you have the nail nicks on both sides, in which case you have to, you can still grab it, but you grab it with your index finger and pull it open. And as you can tell, I don't have to look to do this. I know where to feel for the nail nick and I just pull it open. I think a large chunk of the problem that people have when it comes to opening Rough Rider knives or any kind of traditional pattern knife is they're just not as used to opening these knives as other people are. It's an unfamiliar pattern or something like that. I could be wrong, but that's my thought on nail nicks and Barlows. But finally, I guess to wrap things up, my issues really with Rough Riders, as you can tell, and this is just a small sample of what I've got. I've got well over 100 of them, probably closer to 150 Rough Rider knives. I do not have as many of the modern ones or the newer Rough Rider knives, but it has nothing to do with the quality of the knife. It really comes down to how many canoes do I want to buy? How many Barlows do I want to buy? Is it enough that now it's made in micarta versus I have one in a bone material that I already like? It's things like that that have reduced the number of Rough Riders that I have bought. The patterns that I tend to collect are scout knives, which I've already mentioned to them, and toothpicks. And those are patterns that they just don't make a lot of. But when it comes down to unique patterns that they come out with, like the little cub lockback, I saw that, I really liked it, so I started buying plenty of those. And that's the way it comes down. I mean, it isn't that I find anything bad about the newer ones. It's like, how many canoes do I need? How many Barlows do I need? How many sow belly stockmans do I need? So when it comes to patterns that I already have, I'm less likely to pick up a new Rough Rider. When it's a new pattern, well, it's a pattern that I kind of have to like. A lot of people swooned over the upswept boat trapper. I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. But it's also something that I don't really see myself using very much, so one was enough. So I didn't have to run out right away and buy the new one in red. If they come out in stag, yeah, I'll grab one in stag. If they were to come out with one in white smooth bone, I would grab one in white smooth bone. If they came out with one in tortoiseshell, I would pick it up in tortoiseshell, because those are the things that I collect. So I guess to sum everything up, because this has really been going on a long time, I have no issues with the current production Rough Rider knives, other than they're just not the ones that I'm interested in collecting. So yeah, I guess maybe I am the hipster of Rough Rider knives. I like the older ones better than the newer ones, and maybe that's weird, because I know a lot of people really dig the new ones, and I can understand why they do, because they are still one of the best knives when it comes to bang for your buck. They are right there, really top quality knives for the price you pay. In any case, I'll let you go.
Thanks for dropping by Knife Chats with Tobias. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, leave a comment below, and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you know when the next episode is up and online.